I'm Reverend Rachel McGuire, and I'm pastor here at Immanuel Baptist Church. For me, I was thinking about worship and where I find God in worship. And I was thinking, we had Reverend Robin Lunn here, the executive director of the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, and she was staying with me and coming to preach, and we were on our way driving out of my driveway and coming to church, and I'm sitting in the front seat, and I suddenly just bubbled over and I said, I love church. And she just kind of looked at me like I was a little crazy because, I don't know, I guess in some ways being a pastor is a job, but I genuinely love church, and I genuinely love worship at Immanuel and love coming and love being with the community. I feel like there's just this feeling of being with my family and being with other people who deeply love God and love community and are interested in being fully and deeply embodied in their commitments, their faith commitment. And so there's something about being around deep people like that. All different, all individual. What their faith commitments mean to them is quite different. How that gets embodied in their lives is quite different. But there's this deep connection of seriousness about what we do and joy in it. And so that's kind of what makes me go, I love church, coming to worship on Sunday. And so one story about worship that, for me in worship, often community prayer time is one of the times when I feel God most deeply, because folks in the community are sharing deeply about their lives, and I experience a lot of God's presence in that. But one example that comes to my mind is the whole service was about forgiveness. And during the prayer time after the sermon on forgiveness came down, and Demetrius, who's a young man in our congregation, was sitting kind of in the front row, and he rarely speaks during prayer time, and he was very sort of hesitantly holding up his hand, and I came over to bring him the microphone, and he could barely speak, and he basically said that he had a letter in his pocket to his cousin or a relative of some kind that was part of a conflict that they were involved in, and that based on the service and based on a deep experience of what forgiveness is, he wanted to tear up that letter with his church family and try to make a shift in the situation, a difficult situation he was involved in. And another member of our congregation ran and got the offering plates so that he could take the torn up letter and drop this letter into the offering plates as his offering to God, as a deep shift in his sense of conflict in his life. And right at that moment, as he's tearing up this letter, Mary, an older woman in our congregation, who's in the exact opposite corner in the far back, stands up and says, I have something to say. And so I run back with the microphone, and she just says, I love you, Demetrius. So this is moments like this happen in this family. Two people are from such radically different places, radically different, I'm sure, views and understandings of who God is, but in this really more deep place, their lives are being transformed by God, and they recognize that in each other. And so, I love church. Immanuel is definitely on the progressive end of things. It's kind of undeniable. There's a broad sense of inclusion. There's a really deep commitment to being who you are and respecting that. And sometimes who people are in the community is quite different. And so one thing I find unusual is I've been in other progressive churches, other progressive Baptist churches in particular. But there is here two things that I find different about Immanuel. One is the strong sense of inner journey. I find a lot of times I've been in communities that are very strong on the activist side of trying to make a change in society, which I deeply respect, and a lot of folks here are deeply engaged in that kind of work. But there's a way that we get depleted in that work when we don't really do the mystical inner journey connection to God stuff to get renewed and refreshed, and also to help us discern in the context of larger problems where we're called to put our own energies. And I feel like there's a lot more attention to that here, that there's a real respect for, instead we don't do that prophetic thing of everyone needs to go work on X issue. It's more like, yes, we're all called to embody our faith commitment in the world, but you're a totally unique individual. Let's really feel God's presence together and find out where your energies belong in this larger project of bringing more love to the world. And I value that tremendously, and I've been really deeply healed by it personally, opening up that part of myself and having a communal space to do that. I thought, before I did a lot of that individually, but having communal space for that's very powerful. I think the other difference from some other progressive churches I've been in here at Immanuel is what I think of as an allergic reaction to groupiness. And I've seen in progressive churches where we group, especially groups we feel that experience injustice, for strategic reasons to be able to articulate and resist that injustice. And so I kind of expected that here, but really here there's such a deep respect for the unique ways that God is manifesting in a given person, that there's a real suspicion of labeling that person with a name of a group. And I appreciate that, and I see the value in that, and the kind of trust in the unique identity of every individual. And actually the real resistance to label anybody as a victim, because that also is a limiting category. And so there's a real interest in come as you are, be who you are, be your eccentric self in every way that you want to be, as long as it's not harming yourself or other people. And let's delight in the way God is manifesting in you. And so I value that greatly about our worship, and hopefully that's expressed in worship, and I see ways that is, but also in so many other ways in the congregation, which happens all week, every day, morning, noon, and night. We do have this sort of shell in the church that seems quite traditional, and we've got the pretty sanctuary and so forth, and certain elements of worship which are traditionally liturgical. So there's kind of this expectation maybe that it'll be this very simple 1 hour service with a lot of predictable elements in it, and that shell and structure still remain there, but we have a lot of people that want to contribute and share and speak. And so, for instance, we share preaching with, there's 8 or 9 people on a preaching team, even in a congregation which probably has a little over 100 active people and 40 or 50 people on a Sunday. We've got 20 people on a worship team. People want to help participate and create worship. And so we've really, it's an interesting challenge as a pastor to integrate enough structure to have a worship that doesn't go for 3 hours, yet to create spaces, especially Sunday, where we're all together, where people get some voice and some participation. And so there's a lot of folks that will participate on a given Sunday in various ways. And if you're here, you see different voices, different experiences, different perspectives. And some of it's broad and about the world, and others that are deeply personal about what's happening in people's lives. So I love that challenge, though. As much as it creates a headache on some days, because there are folks that would like to be done, in around an hour, and folks that would worship all day if they could. But that's a great challenge to have. It's a really fun challenge to have. Even when people come to the church and they're like, well, I kind of like your theology or whatever, and I want to come to your church, and I'm like, no, you need to come and decide if these people are your people. Do you know? It's about the community. That's how you decide whether you're going to a church. Pastors come and go, but are these people your people, this community? If you're deciding on a church, that's what I think, that's what I want people to do. Of course, they can come and make sure that, they like the preaching reasonably enough or whatever, but yeah, I think they should come in and come to fellowship hour, do the hanging out till 2 o'clock thing people do, have some really deep philosophical conversations, listen to folks talk about how Buddhism and Christianity connect, whatever it is, and see if that feels good, see if that feels enriching.